Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Into the Terminal. Today, we're going to be talking about command line tips and tricks. So, Nate, what do you have in store for us?
What do I have in store? I mean, we have a lot of things in store. I mean, like so many things, all the things, all the best things, all the things that will save you time.
Yeah. Well, and so this is like things that we use mostly daily, although there's a couple that when we were doing research, I found, and it was like, oh, that's cool. I'll have to add that to my lexicon. The
Yeah,
big thing
and
is,
I'm a little sad that the one I really wanted to learn about doesn't always work. So we'll get to that later, though.
the big thing is that not all of these are ones that you might want to do all the time. In my experience, you also have to work to like get in the habit of using them. Because
Right.
if you don't get in the habit, then you don't use them and they just kind of fall away.
And
But
some of them, it's like, yeah, there's a really cool shortcut that does that, but it's also really simple to just use the backspace key. So,
yeah. Well, why don't we jump into the terminal and we'll get started. All
sounds
right.
good.
So this is one of my boxes. And I want to start with one that I'm always shocked that people don't know, which is the tab key. So tab will complete bash commands or provide options if they're not unique. So for example, ls/v tab. So because there's only one directory at the top level that starts with a V, it fills it out when I hit tab. And then if I do W tab, right, it fills it out as long as it's unique. And HTML tab, and then there's nothing in there for me to do beyond that. And then let's see. Oh, we can do it with commands. System tab. So I hit tab once, it didn't complete it. I hit tab a second time. Here are all the things that match what I have partially typed, right? Which is system. So if I make it a little bit more unique, system CT tab, it fills it out because there's only one thing that matches what I've partially typed. This is also really handy for commands that support bash completion. And so one that we've used on the show in the past is NMCLI. So NMCLI, people complain because it makes very long commands to like do stuff. And so they don't want to remember all of the subcommands to do things, but that's cool because you can use tab to help remind you what comes next, right? So if I NMCLI tab, here's the next things I can add. So if I NMCLI connection tab, here are the things I can do with NMCLI connection, right? So I can use the bash completion, the using of the tab key to not only suggest what the next thing would be, but again, when I write it to be unique and hit tab, it fills it out. And if I tab again, like there's the things, right? So we can get things like our interface names, like ENNS4 or LO, so that you don't have to remember the exact contents of these like longer commands. You can build them as you go by at each stage. What comes next? Oh, it's that thing off the list. Cool. What comes next? Oh, it's that thing off the list. So tab. If you don't use tab, get in the habit of using tab.
And if I recall, this is extensible too. Like there's some sort of a plugin architecture where you can say what auto completion, how it operates for a command, right?
Yeah, and so the RPM that gets installed is bash-completion.
Right.
And then any commands that honor bash completion will then start using tabs as their bash complete key of reference. So,
and if you double tab and there's like a ridiculously large number of commands that are going to return, it even warns you, which I think is handy.
we've learned lessons over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one, right? The other thing that we wanted to cover in Critical Path today is history. History, basically, we keep track of all the commands that you've run in the shell. There's actually limits, but we'll talk about that in a second. So if you run the history command, these are all the ones that I've done recently. So you can look back at what you've done in the past. You can also re-execute them. So for example, maybe I want to DNF update kernel again. So I can use exclamation point, and that's command number 9. So exclamation point 9 will just re-execute that command out of my history. You can also re-execute the exact previous command. All right, so if I bang, bang, that re-executes the last command that I've run. And Nate, you turned me on to something literally just before the show where you could use bang, bang embedded with something else. So
I mean, how many times have you run a command and then you forgot to run it through sudo, right? This has to be the most common use for the bang bang command. I don't know how you didn't know this.
Maybe because I don't run this with sudo because I'm bad. So you can see that it ran sudo dnf update kernel after I embedded the exclamation point shortcut.
Yeah, and you could also, like, if you ran, I don't know, ls, and then you're like, oh, but I'd really like to see the long listing. If you did bang bang space -l, then it would show you the long listing. So, imagine if you had a long command and you're like, I forgot that one flag. You just add that to the end. There you go.
Yeah, and you can see that right here, it actually prints out the command that it has interpreted that you wanted to run. So if for some reason it's giving you something crazy, you can actually see what it was that it ran that produced that output. Another one, and actually we were talking about search and replace a while ago, and a whole bunch of viewers were like, Ctrl+R, you savages! But we weren't covering search and replace on command line history. We were covering other stuff that day. Right. Ctrl+R, and you can basically partially type what you're looking for. So if I do a DNF, right? So DN is what I typed in. This is the last command that included a DN. And so if I do a DNF install, right? And so on over here, it's showing, this is what I'm typing, and you can see it's highlighting out of the command history what it is, right? So if once you find the command you're looking for, you can just hit enter and it'll re-execute it. Or what I often do is press the right arrow key and it pulls that command onto my command prompt without running it so that I can edit it, right? So if I got close to what I wanted in the past, or I need to reuse something. So for example, one of my history, I set a user for this guy right here, set a password for user Joe. So maybe if I do a Ctrl+R, echo, right arrow, and I want to change what I set as password to, right? I can bring that command onto my command line, make any customizations I want, and then hit enter to re-execute that updated command.
Yeah. Now, the thing I always wish Ctrl+R did, and maybe it does, and I just never figured out how, is once it, say more than one command matches your search, I wish I could scroll through them and pick the one I want, right? Because maybe I don't exactly remember what the command was, or maybe the command I'm looking for is identical to the one that it found, but it's slightly different. You know what I mean? But like if you were to hit up and down there, it doesn't immediately search through those. I think that'd be a cool feature, but I'm not going to go like submit a bug or something over it.
I actually think there is a way to do that, but I don't know it.
I've never been bothered enough by it to go figure out if there's a way to do it.
So I said that at the beginning of talking about command history that it kept track of all your commands, and then I was like, well, not all. That's because there's actually a variable that dictates how many we keep. So if we do an echo $HISTSIZE, so we'll keep the last 1,000 commands that you've entered in through your history. So as you're doing a reverse search or using the up arrow to go back through your history, you'll get up to the last 1,000 commands. If that's not enough, you can change the HISTSIZE variable. In fact, there's a couple other history-related variables too. If we do a set, pipe into grep hist. So set is all the variables that are set in my environment. That's also ones that are going to be exported to child shells. And so we can see that there's a file where all the history is synchronized. So when I log out, it actually takes history from my session and puts it in this file so I can have it the next time I log into the machine. That hist file size will be 2,000 commands. So there is a finite size to how much we'll store, but if you want to change it, you can change the hist file size variable. And then what we're keeping live in the memory of the shell is 1,000 commands. So you can adjust these variables as you see fit if you want more or less history stored. I guess downside is that the more history you store, the more memory gets used by your shell for storing the history data. But I mean, these days, do we really care? I mean, we've gone past the no one should need 48K of RAM days of your
640. So Nate, by the way, that's the quote. 640.
Oh, 640. Okay.
No one should need more than 640 because he was talking about MS-DOS.
Right. All right. So that's a little bit on command line shortcuts and like tips and tricks. We covered tab and history, but stay tuned because we're going to do even more. Don't forget to mash that like and subscribe. Yeah. So the more stuff that we're going to do, we're going to talk about moving in your command and making edits to your commands. We're also going to talk about aliases. So stay tuned and we'll get to all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So Nate, I remembered to say like and subscribe today.
You did. You did. Everyone should do that because, you know, we're YouTubers, we're influencers, and that's how we live.
Oh, we're not influencers. Stop it. All right. So again, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of key character combinations. And if you don't use it, you won't remember it. So you pick up the ones that are really useful for you. You practice them to get them embedded in your habits, and then you'll use them forever. I actually have one later on. You may have noticed as I was working, I was clearing my screen so you could see everything at the top of the screen. And literally today, somebody was like, why are you using the clear command? Here's a key combination to do it. And we'll talk about that one. But I was like, well, because clear's my habit. Something I've been doing for like decades. Yep. So yeah, yep. I learned something new from a viewer today.
We always learn something new when we do Into the Terminal. That's part of the fun, right? Like
that's right.
You get those habits, you get the things that you type out of complete muscle memory, and then you're like, wait, I've been typing 5 more characters than I need to all these years. All those keystrokes.
All those keystrokes I could have saved.
Yeah, all that carpal tunnel I might have avoided.
So Nate, are you going to show us some around like moving around stuff?
Yeah, so these are sometimes useful, sometimes not. These are things I'm actually not in the habit of using mostly, except a couple of them, right? So Scott had showed you history, right? Up and down arrows here, right? So that's one thing you can do with the arrow keys. The other thing is, I don't know, let's say we've got a long command, like, I don't know, cat, etsy, shadow, right? And we did the thing, and then we're like, oh, but what I really wanted to do was like change etsy shadow. Use the left and right arrow keys to move around, and then you can just change this by backspacing it and then say like Vim, I'm going to open it etsy shadow in an editor instead, which, by the way, you probably shouldn't do unless you know what you're doing, but this is an example, and this is a lab system, and I can destroy it all I want. Okay, so that's one thing. You can also move to the start of a line, and this is where these control keys start to come into play. And these are like a throwback to the days when keyboards didn't necessarily have all of the cool functionality that we have today, right? Maybe you didn't have arrow keys to work with. So you use these control sequences to move around in like mainframe days and stuff, right? And a lot of these are just from that, right?
Not mainframe days. They were Unixy things and terminal.
Whatever, the old days, those old fogey days, right? The really long bearded graybeard days. Anyway, but you have to admit a lot of this is historical, right? This is people as they were moving into Unix were coming from things like mainframe. A lot of these control sequences are a lot of them are historical, but so many people are so used to them. So Ctrl+E and Ctrl+A. I'm going to do Ctrl+A first because I'm already at the end of a line. So maybe you can guess what Ctrl+E is going to do. But if I do Ctrl+A, it moves you to the beginning of the line. Ctrl+E moves me to the end of the line. And that can be helpful if instead of going like this, right, to get to the beginning, or like this to get to the end, you just Ctrl+E or Ctrl+A. Now, I believe the end and home buttons will also do this on your keyboard. However, some terminals don't respect the end and the home buttons. And I was just doing this yesterday. In fact, I was working on something on the command line on my MacBook here, and the home and end buttons just weren't working. I think they normally work, but for some reason they weren't. So Ctrl+E and Ctrl+A can save you there.
So Nate, I use Ctrl+A and Ctrl+E all the time.
Yeah.
Because like you vimmed Etsy Shadow. Oh wait, that's not what it said. It was in read only.
Right.
So maybe you want to change that for ls-l Etsy Shadow, but you don't want to use the right hand or the left hand arrow key to move all the way back, especially if you have a really gnarly command line with all kinds of pipes. So it's like Ctrl+A to move you to one side, Ctrl+E to move the other, because those are often where you want to make changes, how you started the command line, or adding options or additional arguments at the end of the command line.
Right, right. And there's also a control sequence that'll move you one character at a time, but there's really no reason because your arrow keys will do that. If you don't have arrow keys, I don't know what you're doing today.
Yeah. I mean, so that one is a throwback to like
the
1980s when terminals didn't have arrow keys on their keyboards.
Right.
So I had to be able to like move between stuff.
Yep. And another one that I unfortunately can't show you because this is another case where it doesn't work in every terminal, but it does work if you're in an actual Linux terminal or if you're at a console or something. And that is you can skip ahead and back a whole word at a time, right? And those are Alt+B and Alt+F. Alt+B will move you back a word and Alt+F will move you forward a word. But you can see how if I do this here, Alt+B just gives me this weird command or this weird character, right? And Alt+F will do the same thing. It gives me these strange characters. And that's because of a terminal emulation problem. It's either macOS interprets them weirdly or the web console we use for these terminals interprets it weirdly. Either way, I couldn't make it work for my demo, but I did try it on my Fedora laptop and it worked right there. So your mileage may vary.
So I think you're right. Like, we're running this within Chrome. Well, does Chrome intercept the alt something? It does. And so that's why you're not getting the behavior that you're expecting. Or different operating systems may have slightly different things. Like if you're using PuTTY on your Windows machine, Windows may capture some of those control sequences as native Windows controls because it thinks that you're talking to it, not that you're trying to pass that stuff through to the session that you're using PuTTY to connect with. Yeah,
and the Alt key is usually used by your window manager, whether you're on Mac, Windows, or Linux, to do things like menu shortcuts. Control is also used for some of those, but it's not, in my experience, it's not as frequent. Alt is like the go-to for those commands. So that it could be anything. It's grabbing that Alt key when I hit those buttons.
Yeah, and oftentimes there's like yet another key that you can use to protect that key from the operating system intercepting the key. So it's like, you know, Shift Alt something or open Apple key Shift whatever. So there's like keyboard combinations upon keyboard combinations. But why do you really want to do that to yourself, Nate?
Yeah, it's at some point it's how much do I have to remember to make the keyboard combination work versus how much do I just use to like use the arrow key to get back to the thing that I care about.
There we go.
All right, so Scott, you've got some on inline editing here of commands, right?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about that with history earlier, where you can like recall the command to your command line, and then you want to make changes. Well, how can you make changes a little bit faster than using arrow keys and backspaces, right? So just a couple of things. So if I ls var html, there's nothing there, but I wanted to edit a file. So I can do vi, and then instead of typing that whole thing again, even with tabs, I can just use escape period, and it will pull the last token from my previous command line into my current command line. So I use this one all the time because often I'm like looking for something or I found something, but I want to run another command on it. And so I'll replace my command and then pull in that last token from the previous line. And notice that it didn't just execute it, it just pulled it into my command line where my cursor was. And then I can do something like continue to edit and make changes.
Super businessy.
Yeah. All right. Maybe I want to do another thing. Like I want to long list I want to list this file now, right? I tried to list it earlier and it wasn't there, but now I want to list it now that it is there. So I can do a caret vi caret ls. And what this will do is it'll go to the previous command. It'll look for this search string vi and pull it out and replace it with the second string ls, and then it will automatically execute the command. So I don't get an option to like make changes to it. It just does this search and replace and executes it. It will only do the search and replace on the first instance of this character set, right? So if I had multiple places where the word vi was used on that command, it'll only replace and re-execute the first one.
So maybe you want to check your history before you do this, is what you're saying.
I mean, usually because you're working with the one previous command,
yeah,
visible, but it's not a global search and replace. It's a singular first occurrence search and replace.
The first occurrence in your history, though, right? So if you don't get the match right, it could match something further up in the history and then just run it, right?
Also, yes. Also, yes. All right. One of the other things that I do a lot is I will edit a really long command. So I sometimes do really long single line shell scripts, and we'll want to like do something at the beginning or the end, or maybe cut off something. So if I recall my previous command, I'm at the end, and I can move to the front and use my arrow keys. Now I'm close, and just like make a change and hit enter to re-execute it.
Right.
We can also do move to the front, move somewhere like here, and Ctrl+E. Oops, sorry, not Ctrl+E. Ctrl+K. Ctrl+K will cut from the cursor position to the end of the line, and actually puts it into a copy-paste buffer, which I learned today too. I always just use it to edit stuff. I didn't really care about pulling it back, but if you Ctrl+Y, it puts it back. So it puts it in a copy paste buffer, and then you can paste it. And if I want to, I can just keep pasting it. I don't know why I'd want this many, but I can.
You never know. There was another one, and I think we in our preparation for the show, I think it got dropped from the notes. But there's another one where if you're at the end of the line and you want the last thing, right? Like in your example, the var dub HTML index HTML. If you wanted that whole chunk, you could see there was a command that would grab that, right? So I wanted to grab that one thing and then maybe do vim and then the thing, right? And then you could cut it out,
so,
do the thing, and then paste. Yeah.
Yes, that was Ctrl+W.
Yeah, that takes what's before the cursor. It'll take the last thing that's before the cursor. So yeah, you had the right command, just you had the cursor in the wrong place.
Yeah, and then, well, here, let's do this. Nope. You can also do an undo of an edit. I don't remember what it is. All right, so Ctrl+W pulls the last line from before the cursor, and it pulls it into your copy-paste buffer, right? So,
yeah, so now if you were to like Ctrl+C and then say vim and then paste that in, then boom, there you go. There you go.
Yep. You can also do cut from the cursor to the beginning of the line. So if I do that and then come up here and do Ctrl+U, that cuts from the cursor all the way to the beginning, so I can lop off all that stuff, and it puts it again in the copy paste buffer. So I could do this and then Ctrl+Y. I can still copy and paste out of that buffer that I put that thing that I cut into.
Yep.
All right, so that's a little bit on editing. I actually found this really cool graphic on GitHub to demonstrate this. So let me see if I share my other tab. So this was on the GitHub, and I'll put it in the notes as well, for a user named Flip the Web. Flip the Web had a whole bunch of Bash command line shortcuts, but what I found really nice is this graphic that he made that shows
handy.
like these are the controller characters for moving around, and it showed you like how the different characters would move you. And then also these are the characters for making edits and getting rid of stuff. So you can do like to the word boundary or the entire line. So there's some other alternatives.
That's handy. So, you know, print that out, stick it to your monitor, and you can get used to using these things.
Maybe, if that's what you want to do.
All right. So I've got some more on some swapping of things that are already typed on your terminal, right? So there's two commands I'm going to show you here. So raise your hand if you've ever done this. System-CLT. And then you're like, whatever, status foo. And then you're like, oh, no, that's supposed to be System-CTL. Well, there's a keyboard shortcut that'll take the two characters before the cursor and transpose them. Apparently, this happens enough that that there's a keyboard shortcut for this. Now, I could just go bang bang and then L, TTL instead. But if I do, let's put it back to where I had it. It's Ctrl+T will transpose them. Ctrl+T, bang. Oh, what did I get wrong there?
Oh, your cursor was in the wrong spot.
My cursor was in the wrong spot. No, I've totally messed it. CTL, CLT, right? Okay.
There you go.
Now, there. Ctrl+T. There we go. No, it did it again.
Because you
I don't
need to
know. This worked before, I'm telling you. No, look.
I think your cursor needs to be on the end of the
character. Oh, there, look, it worked. So it must have been the space that was after it that was messing me up. So maybe you're right. It was supposed to be here. I don't know. Anyway, the point is you can transpose two letters. Now, again, this is like, that's neat. It's kind of cool that it does that. But what if instead I did systemctl, and you might remember in the days before systemd, we had that command service, and then you would give it the service name and then the command you wanted to run. So for a long time, when I was using systemd command, systemctl, I would do this and then go, well, no, that doesn't work because it's supposed to be the other way around. It's supposed to be the command and then the service, because you can put a list of services if you really wanted to, right? There's a command line shortcut that will also swap the last two words, and that's Escape+T, right? Wasn't it? Yes, escape. So hit the escape and then the T, and there you go. Swaps the two words, which I think would have been really handy to know, I don't know, 10 years ago when I was transitioning from the old service to systemctl.
Yeah, that would have been super handy.
Would have been good to know. Good to know. But, here we are learning these things, learning them together.
Well, and sometimes things like firewall rules, sometimes ordering matters between them. So that's another place where like transposing the words may be helpful as you get some errors. It's like, oh, this is not the right argument for that. It's like, oh, let me go and transpose these two things and
right.
See
right. All right. Next, we're back to, oh, you've got one about weird things.
Yeah, weird things.
Tell us about weird things, Scott.
So weird terminal things. So let's say we accidentally cat a binary. Right, and you can see that my my command is all messed up because in that binary there were all kinds of control characters and stuff that got interpreted from trying to turn that binary into text, and my command's all messed up. Right, you see it there. It's like
bracket,
bracket,
all kinds of broken.
Cyrillic character. Yeah. So one might try to log out and log back in or close their window or whatever. You don't need to do that. You can actually just use the command reset.
Which you can't see, but oh no, it didn't work.
Oh, that's because of my terminal emulator. So let me just refresh the terminal emulator quick. There you go.
There you go. Reset would have done it at a console. I've done that a bunch of times.
Yeah. Reset will also reset the size. So if you've ever been on like a machine that's using a window emulator for your terminal and you resize the window and you're running a command like top, but it doesn't use the whole window, it's still like the smaller size. Reset will also resize the window based off of the current size of what's there. Or the opposite, if you've made the window smaller, but your output is not smaller, it's doing all kinds of wrapping because it thinks the terminal is bigger. Reset will refresh the column and row data of your terminal size and make sure that your formatted output understands the size of your terminal.
Apparently, Shotnu's been rebooting all this time to fix that problem.
I doubt that's the case. But
I think that's true.
You could see that you couldn't see it when I was typing it, right? It was all coming out crazy.
Yeah.
But if we look in the history, right, it's there. Like that was what was actually going into the terminal was the reset command.
Yeah.
The terminal settings were all wonky.
The character set was all messed up. Probably what happened.
But man, that's way easier than like closing and reestablishing your session or whatever else, right? So that's a simple one. The other one, and this is the one that I alluded to earlier from a viewer, right? So I always use the clear command when I want to clear it off and bring it back to the top, but Ctrl+L will clear the screen. Who knew?
Yep.
I'm saving 4 characters of typing there, Nate.
Yeah. And honestly, Ctrl+L isn't that hard to hit because it uses 2 hands. Control with one, L with the other. There's no like weird stretching with your hand to try to get the things. I've been using that for years, and I picked that up, well, from some of the like super crazy sysadmins that were in the team that I joined about 15 years ago. It was just like watching these folks at the bash prompt was just, I learned so much from those folks. Things that I never knew existed, like a lot of those control commands, Ctrl+L, Ctrl+R, and it actually came up in chat, and we weren't sure we were going to get to this one anyway, but Ctrl+D will log you out of a session, right? Which I think is super handy, instead of typing exit or log out, which is a much longer command, right? All right, so let's see. We got 2 more, I think, from me, and then we're going to wrap it up. So let me get my terminal back up here. Okay, so command aliases is really helpful. Now, did you know when you do an ls, you know how when you do it, let's do an ls of like Etsy, right? All this color output, that's not default ls behavior. That's an alias that comes out of the box with RHEL and a lot of other Linux distributions because it's super helpful, right? This is when you run ls, it's assumed that you're going to run with the color output. And another cool one that a lot of people use is a shortcut called LL, which gives you a long listing, right? Instead of doing ls space -l, you do LL, and it does that. Well, these things aren't separate commands, right? They're aliases. And if we run the command alias, A-L-I-A-S, it's hard to type, really. You can see that these are the built-in aliases that came out of the box with this particular system, right? And there's also ls-A. I don't use that one that often. But there it is. It's there in the aliases. So L is ls-cf, which I'd have to look up what that does. LA, LL, LS, these are all, really common commands that someone decided should be aliases. But you can also see there's a grep alias here that adds color to the output of grep, which is really handy. Same deal with fgrep and egrep, right? So those are good things to know, right? That you can also make aliases, right? If I just did like, I don't know, alias foo. Oh, I didn't mistyped alias again. Here's that tab thing. Foo equals, I don't know, ls-l. And then I just type foo. There we go. A lot of people I've seen take and make an alias for that bang bang command earlier that we did earlier, where they do like alias, I don't know, keep mistyping alias. Oops, we'll call it oops. Equals sudo space bang bang. And now if I type the word oops, right? So now if I did like, I don't know, cat, Etsy shadow, and I was doing that as a standard user and I forgot to do sudo, if I just type oops, it'll do it with sudo. Oh, somehow I messed that up when I made the command. But anyway, the point is that you can make it. I'm curious why that didn't work. I've seen this work in the past. You can make aliases that'll do things automatically. What?
I can tell you why. If you look at the alias, just run alias command, you'll see that it's because the bang bang.
Yes, because that was the last command I did.
Yes, but it gets put in there before the alias command is run. It's
there's
parsing.
There's a way to make this happen. I just haven't looked into it. I did it on the fly here. I've seen this done. I've done it myself. There must be an escape sequence you have to do that makes it not transpose that for you.
You want to use an escape sequence in your alias command so that the actual token that goes in there is bang bang,
right?
Rather than the bang bang being substituted for the previous command when it builds the alias. But quoting with exclamation points is weird. So you could try \bang \bang.
Curious if I just do single quotes, if that'll be enough. Ah! Now I hit the up arrow on accident. Whatever. We're not going to waste a whole bunch of time on this. My point is, if you can get the right sequence to escape it properly, it will work. And I see in the chat, people are already making fun of me. Trust me, bro, it works. Trust me, it works. I've seen it done. Totally. I'm not lying to you. All right. So the next thing I wanted to show you. Sorry, you have something to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, another comment in chat talked about making these things persistent. And I know you're going to get to that in just a minute too, Nate.
Yeah. So really the next demo is about making a dynamic prompt for, well, we'll just say reasons, right? And the example I'm going to use here is, let's say, because I've done this in the past, when at my last job, we were moving from a world where we did not have SE Linux turned on to a world where we did, because we were trying to be better about being more secure. We had a lot of times where when you log into a machine and you're troubleshooting a problem, if you don't think to check SE Linux, you might not realize that it was set to enforcing instead of permissive, because you're in a world where some systems are enforcing and some aren't. So we made a prompt that had a little token in it that said SE Linux is whether it's permissive, enforcing, or disabled, right? And it would even, I went crazy with it. It made it colored and it put a little token in there, like all kinds of stuff. I'm not going that far with this example, but there's a command, or I should not say a command. There's a environment variable called prompt command. And what this will do is every time the prompt is executed, it'll execute this other command. So what you can do is you can make, you can have something that'll dynamically like populate a variable. And then you can use that variable in your prompt when you actually display the prompt. And then as long as prompt command works properly, it'll execute the thing, it'll set the variable, and then your prompt will change based on what's in there. So let's just, what I'm going to do is put this inside of bash RC, because that's where on this system where the prompt is set. So we're going to search forward for PS1, and right there it is. There's the prompt that's getting set for this machine. Now there's also bash profile where you would normally set things like variables, but for whatever reason on this system, it's set in bash RC. And Scott and I talked about this before the show, and we didn't really delve into why. But just know that bash profile is also an option here. But you're going to want to put this particular thing in bash RC, because you want this to run whenever you execute a new session, a new terminal, even subterminals and whatnot, if you want this prompt to show up. All right, so let me get to the actual thing here. I'm just got to copy and paste this because I have a bunch of variables in here that are hard to retype, and I will typo them if I don't copy and paste. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to set prompt command, and I got an extra space on accident. So the variable name we're setting is prompt command, and what it's going to do is it's going to take the variable name PR SE status, because I thought SE status might already be a variable that I didn't want to overwrite. And it's going to set that to the output of get enforce. Now, you can get a lot fancier with this. You can put logic and whatever in here, but I'm not doing all that for this. And then what we're going to do is in the actual prompt, we're going to add after sort of the end of the prompt where it's, this prompt is a little complicated because it sets colors and it sets other things that are dynamic. So I'm just going to go right to the end of it. And I'm going to put a parenthesis because that's what I want to actually display in the prompt. We're going to do parenthesis, and then we're going to go the name of this variable that we just set. Oh, I don't want all that. I just want this. There we go. Let's see, $, and then the variable name. And we're going to close my parentheses. Now, again, these parentheses aren't part of the command. This is just what I'm going to display, and you'll see in a minute. Okay, so now I've basically said set the variable, and then we're going to print out that variable when we execute the prompt. Okay, now we're going to save this out, and now's the moment of truth. This doesn't work immediately because bash RC only executes when you start a new session, right? So to start a new session, we're just going to use su-, which basically says, make me a new session and bring in the environment for the new session. And now you can see that my prompt has this extra thing in it that has the parenthesis enforcing parenthesis. That tells me that on this system, SE Linux is in fact enforcing. Now, if I do a set enforce 0, and Dan Walsh cries when I press enter, now it immediately tells me, oh, this system's permissive now, right? And if I switch it back to enforcing, there it is, enforcing. So there's one caveat I want to bring up, and maybe this has already been going through chat, I don't know, because every time you mention something like this in a prompt, somebody has this comment. Don't put anything in here that's going to be resource intensive. Don't put anything in here that's going to take a long time to run, because every time you execute anything and it brings the command prompt back, it's going to rerun this command. Also, you could end up in a situation if you're trying to connect to a system that's already resource constrained for some reason, like it's out of memory or the CPU is bound up. It could make your prompt not display because it's trying to run the command and can't. Right now, that may eventually time out and still get you to a prompt. I haven't really exhaustively tested that. It might be smart to put some sort of logic in there that figures out if it can run the command before it runs the command, right? But then, again, this gets into like a chicken and egg problem. If there's no resources, it may not be able to run the thing. So just keep that in mind before you start putting all sorts of awesomely crazy cool things into your prompt. I've seen people use this for like Git statuses and things like that. Again, unless you want to run Git every time you you bring up a prompt, maybe be careful, right? All right, and I think that brings us to the end of the demos.
So there was a little bit of chat going on.
Yeah.
Two things. One, there was some like you can use colorization, which I think you mentioned you used, but
yeah.
Penguin said they use colorization for things like if you're logged in as root to indicate that maybe you're doing something you shouldn't. Also, there was some discussion about profile versus RC. So I'll put this in the stream for our deferred viewers. A profile is run by the login shell when someone establishes a session. So a lot of times you'll see the stuff that gets set in a profile, like when you SSH to a box for the first time and you're logging into it, you get a login shell and hence the profile is executed. If you, I don't know, log in at the terminal, that'll work. Or you're logging through ILO, that'll work. Because those are all login shells where you're authenticating the machine and you're creating a shell for your session that you then get dropped into. Where the differential is really important is when you're using additional shells. So for example, think about when you log into a graphical desktop environment. The graphical desktop environment is what runs within the shell that you logged into. But when you're creating new GNOME terminals or what have you, those are not login shells. Those are additional shells in your existing login session. And so for those, the bash profile is not executed again. It's only executed once for your login shell. And so the RCs are for running commands, and that's what gets executed every time you open up an additional shell. You don't get the profile re-executed, instead you get the RC re-executed. And the reason for that is profiles is where you set variables and you can export them, which means subshells will also get them. But you can't export a command. You have to re-execute a command or run the command, hence RC.
Right. And I just catted out the bash profile in this user's home directory just to show people what's in there. Not much. In fact, it sources bash RC. So yeah.
And bash RC is automatically get executed when you open up subshell. So if you actually ran the command bash and you created a subshell, it would get the RC, but would not get a profile re-executed for it.
Right, right. All right, and I think that brings us to the end of our show.
Yeah. So there you go. Some command line tips and tricks.
Fun trip down the archaic control sequences that'll give you arthritis after years and years of systems administrations.
Well, either that or you're hitting the arrow key many, many times, which gives you even faster arthritis.
Well, this finger, right? It gets a lot of workout when you're hitting these two.
Yeah. Well, so I actually worked with a guy who refused to use the mouse on any system. Yeah.
Okay.
He learned like how to use tabs and spaces and other stuff to like navigate around the GUI instead of using a mouse. And his reasoning for it was once you got adept at it, it was actually faster than taking your hand off the keyboard to work the mouse.
It is. It could be. Yeah.
Yeah. And that I think is the same thing for command line shortcuts, right? Like ultimately it will make you a faster typist and a faster making commands and editing commands than if you use, arrow keys and other things. The big difference is, do you want to dedicate that much of your brain to remembering all of the different control sequences?
Yeah.
I look for the ones that provide me utility, and I'll commit those to memory and use them pretty frequently, like Ctrl+E and Ctrl+A for going to the end and to the beginning of a line. Or Ctrl+K, I use a lot. Ctrl+U, deleting the front part of a line, I actually don't use very often. I have to look it up when I need to use it. But Ctrl+K I use all the time. So you commit those to memory that you use frequently and get utility out of.
It's a similar argument. Like I used to do whenever I was writing a script, or I used to do some personal, like not at a professional level, but personal website development and stuff for my own sites. I would do it all in Vim. Even if I was working on my local machine, I would be editing in Vim. And Vim is perfectly fine for that. It's a pretty powerful editor. You can do lots of things. But the first time I used an actual visual why am I blanking on the term? But an actual visual editor for code, right? Like VS Code, or there was a KDE thing, KDevelop, I think it was called. That was the first one I started using. To be able to just like click on a line where I wanted to make a change and then make the change, it was like, why have I been using all these command line keys to do this stuff all my life? Again, Vim is perfectly fine for that if you love doing it. But some days spending hours writing lines of code in Vim, I don't know, it gets a little tiring. Maybe you just want to click on that line that's 20 lines up instead of going like coming up with some search command or using the up arrow or whatever to get back to that previous line.
20K will 20 lines up.
I know. But again, dedicating that much brain space to the right keyboard shortcuts to do it, I can do it. Is that a good use of my brain? I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So next week, I think we have a theme next week, don't we? Pretty sure
we had something, but I don't remember what it was.
We did come up with it.
Let me see. Oh, we were talking about file system stuff. We were going to do some file system. We were going to do a show on file systems and LVM, things like that.
Cool.
I did want to mention we have some similar shows you may want to check out. We had our Tmux episode, which was recently, it's only a couple weeks ago at this point, and our Find episode, right? This similar vein, right? Cool little utilities that might help you save time at a Linux prompt. So check those out too. We'll put links for them in the description.
So until next week, don't forget to mash that like so I can tell our bosses how great a job we're doing. And if you want to be notified that we're doing shows like this, hit that subscribe. We're actually working on maybe doing some additional show content, not necessarily with me and Nate, but with some of the other members of our team.
That's all secret.
Oh yeah, sorry, I wasn't supposed to say.
Cat's out of the bag.
We're working on it.
Working on it. Probably after Summit. We're all busy till Summit.
Yes. Well, that too.
Which I hope you guys all come to Summit. We want to see all of you. If you come to Summit, meet us there.
Yeah, Nate will be doing things like sessions, and I will be in the RHEL booth doing RHEL things in the booth because I have no actual skills.
I'll be in the booth plenty too. All right, and maybe we'll have a pretty cool announcement for something that's going on in the booth when we get closer to Summit. We'll make you guys wait for that one. So, all right.
Everybody. See you next week for file systems.
Yeah.
And until then,
Have a great one, everybody.